Hi, Stephen and Doug Cornelius.
Hey, how's it going, Sarah?
So, friends and family, we gathered here today to talk about the hand itself as an input device, sparked in part by Sony's recent patent.
Yeah, I was excited to see that Sony put out this patent.
People keep calling it a glove, but it looks more like a bracelet to me.
Yeah, I think it is something that you wear on your hand that senses different aspects of your hand position. I looked at the patent filing, and I have to say it's like basically halfway between. So back in the day, there were two schools of thought for VR glove. One was this thing called the data glove, which basically had little pads here, and it could tell when they touched one another. And so it could detect just the fingertip touches, and it could detect
one thing that I can discern
like
from their patent drawing is how it would track finger movement.
Yeah, so there's another school of VR glove thought, the cyber glove school, and that's what I did most of my work with, and that had flex sensors in it, and so they actually could sense the curvature of your fingers. So those are sort of like the two big schools of VR glove.
And you think that's what Sony's going for?
They actually have a hybridization of both together, which is cool. I mean, I didn't actually see a lot novel in the glove patent, except its very particular phrasings and connections to video game input modalities. Like, for example, if you hit the button here, it puts your hand in like a pointing position.
So it's not a Tony Stark input device for robot blueprints.
Anything could be Tony Stark, right? I mean, I don't know if we even want to go into the Tony Stark direction, but yeah, I think if you get to the core of like what the issues are, everyone's like, it would be amazing if we just like use our hands to do stuff, right? There's this idea of like gestural.
And it could also be really dangerous. That's what editing is for.
That's definitely what editing is for. Yeah, I mean, let's just like, we can't really talk about anything without talking about the Nintendo Power Glove and basically why it failed, right?
Power Glove is really meaningful to me. I think when I was at a yard sale, I love that thing.
Yeah, I think when you get right down to it, you have to look at the informational layer of what you're communicating to the computer with the input device. I think my last article and a lot of like what I want to get people to think about is like, what is the information that's being communicated between the human and the computer with whatever VR thing we happen to be talking about. So the problem with the Nintendo Power Glove is it had these sensors that it basically was like, do this hand gesture to jump. And if you want to fire, do this other hand gesture to fire. And people found out that it was just far easier to press A and B.
So they ended up pressing the buttons on the glove.
And they ended up pressing the buttons on the glove because it was a lot more reliable.
Like a wristwatch calculator.
But also, once you get into it, it's actually a lot, like actually having to do this and this to like jump and fire is actually not any more, like it's not immersive. It's actually just inconvenient. So
why do you think that translates better with the Wiimote? Do you think Nintendo is just ahead of its time?
Well, I think the Wiimote has buttons on it and is sort of it's about attaching a tool to your hand that you can use. There's actually a huge difference. Like a lot of these natural interactions where you just have your hand. I don't know if it's a cognitive fallacy or not, but if you look at the history of human tool use, we always use tools by holding them in our hands and do it like a hammer. You hold the hammer, and the hammer kind of becomes an extension of your hand.
I would like to point out, though, that if you tried to pound a nail into a wall with your fist, it would hurt.
It would hurt. Yeah, but it still would be possible, right?
I just think... And that Italian Greyhound would have been too hard.
Indeed.
It would have been too much for that Italian Greyhound.
Yeah.
Which brings me to an important question. People constantly ask us why we don't, she needs some gentle love, why we don't use the leaf motion sensor for 3D Sunshine.
Right.
Why don't we use the leaf motion sensor for 3D Sunshine? Our audience has been dying to know the answer to this question.
Because the technology's not quite there yet.
What does that mean?
Basically, what 3D Sunshine is predicated upon, and it's kind of like if you think of what a mouse does. A mouse you can or with an iPhone screen, you can click on an icon and drag it around the space. right? And that connection, when you click on an iPhone, like a window or icon with your mouse, and you're moving your mouse and it's moving, right? Or the touch screen, it's called a one-to-one relationship. In the UI community, it's been called direct manipulation, for about, since I think someone coined that in 1980, right? There's an idea where you can be like directly connected to a digital object. And the thing with the Leap motion sensor is it's actually really good at showing you an animation of your hands. But when it comes time to actually connecting and like placing a digital object in space, every attempt I've seen to do this really well with the Leap, where you're actually affecting an object and not just having the hand in the space, it just doesn't work. I have yet to see someone make it work.
We're trying to mimic physical building in digital space.
Yeah.
Why isn't it a better idea to try to grasp a block as though it's a physical block?
Right. So let's say you actually want to place a block. You're trying to control, let's say, the center of the block. The block can be any shape. You can imagine there's like a center point that you're trying to move in space. If I wrap my hands around it, the computer is sensing every single fingertip and trying to use the fingertips to kind of figure out exactly what I'm doing to the block. The block could then move out of my hands. And I think if you've tried, like I was interested, there's this Leap Builder demo that we checked out, this Blocks Leap demo. And it's cool, you can bat them about and do crazy fun stuff like moving blocks around with your hands. If you actually want to grab a block and place it somewhere precise, you just have a lot less precision and control. Whereas if you use something like the Wiimote or the newer generation of one-to-one motion controller, that one-to-one motion controller becomes the block. And you move the controller as if you were moving the block. And you get a precise control over the position and orientation of that block in space. And from that, we're good to go. Like 3D Sunshine stacks so much complexity on top of the simple act of placing a block in space. The issue I've had with the Leap controller is that to place a block, first you have to read the hand, then you have to do all this interpretation of where the fingers are at with physics to get to the block, and there's just so much loss that you're just like, at some point, it's like, I'm just not in control anymore. So,
I know you did a lot of research when you were writing your dissertation about the hand. Do you think there's any way that we could make a tracking device that would work well with a program like ours that doesn't rely on a controller? Do you see that in the future?
No.
That's awfully pessimistic.
It's hard. Let me just put it this way.
What if we had an actual block or object that might...
So people have gone down that course of actual blocks and objects. I'm going to come back to my no in a second because I'm not quite fully on the record with the no, so everyone knows. But a lot of people at the Media Lab, were doing that. People like Brig Ulmer, John Underkoffler were working with Hiroshi Ishii at the time I was at the MIT Media Lab, and they experimented with that. The thing about those kinds of blocks is then when you have a physical thing you're moving, it's not variable, right? It's like the thing with motion controllers, whatever block you grab, it could be a fire engine or a dice or something that you're grabbing, a die. It can sort of range as a digital thing. But when you have a physical thing you're grabbing, then like whatever you're doing, your task is sort of anchored to those physical objects and custom to that.
You have to have all of the Minecraft bricks lying in front of you.
Yeah, and there are cool things. People have done cool things with that. Sifio is an example of people who did really cool things with that. There's definitely cool stuff there.
It doesn't seem practical.
Well, there's there's specificity. So that's a very specific input device. The mouse kills it because it's generic. The touchscreen kills it because it's generic. These more specific input devices kill it in very small contexts, like a Guitar Hero guitar. Kills it for playing Guitar Hero because it's so specific to that one game. And
doesn't kill it for playing Far Cry.
Not so good for playing Far Cry. You can play Far Cry with a guitar. Is that a dream come true? Not exactly, right? An input device actually has to be tailored to the task at hand. So getting back to the Leap motion
I'm sorry guys if I look distracted. I see our engineer Gary over here playing with our new Vive. I'm just going to pan over because
Jerry, just come here. Yeah?
No.
I can't tell where anything in the real world is anymore.
They've got to see the whole setup.
Jerry, do your dance, Jerry.
The only things that are real now is that camera, these controllers.
This is a real moment in the development process, everyone. Check it out. We're setting up our Vive.
It's a true moment.
Expect some awesome 3D sunshine videos coming to you from the Vive very soon.
Yeah, I have to say, based on the HuffPost article, it really drilled home for me how awesome the Vive is, and just how forward thinking.
People are very excited about it, but the problem is that
they're saying the motion
not that
controller
many
is
people
fundamental.
have used it.
I know, and they're sort of like they have a brand issue where their brand is like weaker than the other brands, whereas Valve in gaming is so strong. They're so innovative, and they've been such
the problem
huge
is that
part of
people
gaming
think
for 15
of
years. HTC side
I think they think
phones
of
and stuff.
the Vive as the HTC Vive and not
Well, they do.
Valve,
Well,
but-
people,
but
like, if you're
for
not in the
serious
gaming
gamers.
world, gamers understand Valve. Like your average, neighbor is like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, right? But Vive, by coming out the gates and saying the motion controller is fundamental to what we're doing, is actually really in line with 3D Sunshine and our whole position on VR for the hands. So it's just awesome they came out with the gates and said, you know what? There's no VR without VR for the hands, and it's really cool. I think the article and the feedback and response from
But
that
don't you think
made
that
me
it's a
realize-
little incorrect to say VR for the hands when we're arguing that VR merely with the hands isn't enough?
I'm not
Shouldn't we
arguing
call them VR hand tools?
You divide? Or
Any motion controllers.
we could call motion
I
controller.
would
We
call
need
them
a shorter name.
VR hand tools.
We need a shorter name. But anyway, I want to get back to this point of whether or not this sort of more freeform hand-based input with cyber gloves and things like that it makes sense, right? And I think there are scenarios where they make sense. I don't know if they're going to be the best solution for grabbing and moving a block, but there are things you can do with the glove that you can't do otherwise. And it just boils down to control. So let me give you a simple example, which is surface drawing. Okay? In surface drawing, you're actually drawing using the curvature of your hand. So if you notice, every point on your body is curved a little bit different, right? So when I invented surface drawing, I was like, we're going to use the curvature of the hand to control the shape that you're making. In that case, I actually had a one-to-one motion controller on the back of the hand to give some absolute position. You can now track that using the leap with the finger. You could do surface drawing with the leap. The only problem is how you press a button, right? The leap has a big issue, which is how do you press a button? Mm-hmm. And if they could solve that well, this on-off issue, and then you could couple that with the curvature, and actually have something pretty cool. It may not be the best thing for 3D Sunshine, but it's good for a lot of other things that come down the way.
With the newer iteration of the leap.
I think it doesn't seem to make a quantum leap in terms of what you can do with it. Now the Sony glove has curvature tracking, mm-hmm. and one of the things I did with my glove, I actually had to sew a button on. I had to solder a button together.
Sony I expect will have buttons.
Well, they have. If you look at the patent, they have contact switches. Mm-hmm. Contact switch is very important, and they have bend sensors. So it's kind of the data glove and cyber glove universes put together. And so I think if you look at the leap, and it's what's the real issue that I think is keeping the leap from being very useful? It's a button, contact switch, and Sony is actually putting these things together.
Sony has been talked about a lot
in
terms of motion controllers, but we here at 3D Sunshine have been very impressed by their devices. We've seen them use the PlayStation Move for Project Morpheus. How do you feel about that as a motion controller? Why do you think it's not getting more attention?
I think the reason the Move didn't get attention is because in the market, it was we and Kinect, and they're kind of third to the market. If you look at what that device actually does, its tracking is so much better than even the Wiimote Plus, and it's just.
How do you feel about it in comparison to the Kinect?
It's just a lot more discreet, not quiet, but discrete. There's a lot more discrete button press stuff. The Kinect is another input device that kind of, because you can't have these button presses, it's hard. Buttons are super important to how we get things done on computers. If we lose buttons, we have to, it doesn't matter if we gain a lot. If we lose the ability to just have a contact switch to say, yes, this is starting. I'm starting a stroke. I'm ending a stroke. This is. It's like we've actually lost a lot. So if we move to a new input device that promises all this benefit, but the cost is that we can't press a button, then it's very hard to do all kinds of stuff that
I think
we're
that's
used to
why we
doing on
don't have remote
computers.
controls that don't have buttons.
Yeah, exactly. Remote controls tend to have buttons, and I think that's why the Wii had a lot more significant gameplay because as you're swinging a racket, you can also hit a button to change what direction or do other things. So I guess getting back to this grabbing and moving a block, whether we can do that with a glove or not, it's certainly I think it's beyond the horizon, right? I think in innovation there are things that are on the horizon that you can see that you can activate. And then there are things which I call beyond the horizon, which require other kinds of innovations and new things to happen to sort of activate. So it could be activated by future development. Certainly if you look, hundreds of years, and who knows, a lot of things could happen. There's this active material. But in terms of moving a block in space, the one-to-one motion controller, really, really good at that. It's really good at it, and there's no reason to need anything more than that to do it. I've yet to see someone actually, and this is something I'd ask someone in the community to do. And if you can do this, please let me know. Email me. I want someone to actually take the Leap motion data that come out of the Leap motion controller and demonstrate solid one-to-one tracking, 6-degree freedom tracking. I want to see someone take the Leap's input and be able to precisely move a block and pick it up and put it down with some kind of discrete button press event. I think it can be done. I think if you put the right I think it's like a top echelon person on it, upper echelon. If you put the right genius on it, I think it can be figured out.
You said no.
I think it
Have
requires.
you changed your mind? Are you a flip-flopper? Are you an input device flip-flopper?
Let me just put it this way. I don't think it's easy to do that. I don't think it's better. It's going to take a lot for it to be as good as the current one-to-one motion controllers, but.
It's easier to scratch your nose if you're not holding a controller.
Let's just say I think there's an innovation that we have to go through to get there that I have yet to see.
So basically, in summary, Leap motion, pure camera, tracking with the hands, you say no. Probably not.
Yeah.
Sony, Power Glove, Rebirth, possibly.
It could do 3D sunshine well. It could do surface drawing really well.
But you love the motion controllers.
The one-to-one motion controller is here today, dirt cheap. There are other problems with the glove. You have to put a glove on and off your hand. You think putting glasses on is a big issue for people? Putting a glove on is actually a hindrance. It really hinders usability. Again, you can't look at the glove and just look at its benefits without also seeing the costs. So.
All right, I think that does it. Remember to spay and neuter your pets.
Yeah. Italian Greyhounds are wonderful animals.
But you shouldn't breed them.
No.
Bye.
Ciao.